Thank you. Thank you all for coming this morning. Today we'll be talking about the Tesserae project. It was a large-scale, longitudinal, in situ, multimodal sensing study of information workers. I know it's quite a mouthful, so please bear with me. So first off, I'd like to thank the entire team. It's important to have a wonderful team behind this, and all of these people make this project go, along with their associated students. Oh, and as a general disclaimer, any views presented here don't represent any policies, explicit or implied, of IARPA or the U.S. government. So, why are we doing this study? I'll let Dilbert tell you, or the Dilbert cartoon, exemplify the fact that performance reviews are flawed, particularly with regards to bias and motivation. So employers and employees may have different motivations. They're time-consuming, they're subjective, and they may not be answering the questions that you're asking. So how do we fix this? We include objective sensors and see if those sensors can predict workplace performance. So again, can we predict workplace performance from sensors alone? In order to ask this question, we used several surveys looking at job performance, including task performance, which is the belief that you're doing your job successfully, organizational citizenship, which is participating in behaviors that assist your organization but aren't monetarily rewarded, things like volunteering, organizing workplace outings, etc., and then counterproductive workplace behaviors, which are things that are a detriment to the organization, things like making fun of your colleagues or stealing their lunches. As far as psychological constructs go, we assess cognitive ability, personality, affect, and anxiety. And then from health, we looked at physical activity and sleep. So we assessed these via an initial ground truth battery. It was an hour-long survey, and then we followed up with questions in these various topics every day for 60 days. And the surveys were limited to 5 minutes or less, just so that participants didn't get overwhelmed. In addition, we deployed several objective sensors, including a wearable, a phone agent, Bluetooth beacons, and social media. So for our wearable, we chose the Garmin Vivo Smart 3. It's waterproof, it has a very long battery life, and it has a robust API, which allowed us to stream beat-to-beat intervals, which is a metric very important for heart rate and heart rate variability. And information captured from this device included daily summary statistics for step count, sleep time, and physical activity, as well as time series from heart rate, steps, and a Garmin-derived stress score. And then we also were able to get event-based time series detections for sleep and activity. And then via our phone agent, we captured beat-to-beat interval, as I mentioned before, along with steps, calories, and floors climbed. So basically, we just asked the user, please wear this device all the time, charge it when you're showering, and let us know if you break it, and we'll send you a new one. For the phone agent, we deployed it to iOS and Android devices. It had several abilities to capture data, including capturing data from our Bluetooth beacons. It streamed this data. We captured screen usage, especially unlocks and locks, and then also data usage, including Wi-Fi and cellular. And again, we asked the participants to install this app on their phone, to pair it with the wearable, and to periodically upgrade the app as updates were available. For the Bluetooth beacons, we chose the Gimbal Series 10. They got 2 beacons, one to place at home and one to place at work. The battery life on these were approximately 1 year, so it was very easy to place and forget about it, which was great for us. They also carried 2 portable beacons. These batteries lasted about 6 weeks, but they allowed us to judge social interaction. These captured information was captured via the phone agent and from Gimbal API callback, and we collected things such as sightings, signal strength, temperature, etc. And then also with these multiple smaller beacons, we could get visits. So if my phone detects your Bluetooth beacon and your phone detects my Bluetooth beacon, we can consider that a face-to-face social interaction. And for that, we got start time, stop time, and beacon IDs of the participants involved. For social media, we collected behavioral and social interaction metadata, including status updates and comments from Facebook, And then we also collected job roles and education information from LinkedIn. And again, we asked our participants to authorize one data collection, but we had some trouble with that, which I will get back to later. So who was in the study? We ended up with 757 participants, most of which had at least 9 months of data. And the median was 330 days in the study. So the vast majority of participants stayed the vast majority of the time. So we started enrolling in January in 2018, and we just wrapped up a few weeks ago. We recruited professionals in cognitively demanding fields, people like engineers, information workers, OIT support people, etc. So I had a small Midwest tech firm cohort, a larger Midwest tech cohort, a small to medium-sized university in the Midwest, and a very large consulting company. And then finally, we had a miscellaneous group which kind of didn't fit into any of these previous categories, friends, families, etc. So one of the nice things about our study is we were able to recruit from across the continental U.S. So studies doing this kind of longitudinal study really should be able to be applicable across a large area. And here we show we have participants from Seattle all the way out to Massachusetts. Okay, so in deploying this large-scale study, of course, we faced challenges. One of the first and initial challenges was the incentive structure. So because we wanted people to place beacons at home and at work, we needed to work with companies to ensure that we were allowed to do so and we weren't violating any issues, and that our participants who were in the study didn't have any problems with their workplace in doing this. So the biggest pushback we got were from legal and HR departments within companies. I think they're mostly reluctant to take on any additional perceived risk. But once we convinced a couple companies to work with us, we found that the participants very much enjoyed working and doing the study. But we ended up with two methods of payment based on our corporate requirements. So the first was direct pay, which is where we pay the participant based on their compliance. It was end-loaded for maximum data collection. What I mean by that is in the very beginning of the study, they had small payments. Toward the end of the study, they got very large payments. So the final payment was $350 of the total $750 that they received for participation. Another partner had us do a lottery payment where they received tickets for compliance, and then we used those tickets to conduct a weekly drawing of $250 per every 25 participants. So in order to pay the participants, we mailed them Visa prepaid gift cards. This was nice because of an issue we talk about later where participants didn't return all of the devices or necessarily set up things. But if they were compliant, they were paid. And on average, the goal was 80% or better. In addition, at the conclusion of the study, they got to keep the wearables, the beacons, and a USB battery we gave them to offset phone usage and battery drain. And then we're looking to send an end-of-study report to tell them what their data tells us about them. It's still in the works. So one of the big concerns from the participants was privacy. And as we mentioned, as we deployed this, we were getting into the midst of the Cambridge Analytica scandal and surrounding social media issues. So participants were very cognizant of their location and their data and their privacy. So we wanted to make sure we addressed those concerns. And so in order to do that, we started with an informed consent, which is about a 2-page document describing what we were doing and why, followed by a very technical overview. And so this had an item-by-item endorsement. It would tell them for each stream what we were collecting, why we were collecting it, how we would store it, etc. So we'd say something like, for a Facebook post, you'll say, "I love ice cream." We would collect data saying 3 words, December 7th, positive affect. And then finally, we had an FAQ, which helped summarize this long document into a much more digestible format. And we sent these out in advance and on the day of, so participants had ample time to review and ask questions about anything they saw in this document. So now that we've interested them and consented them, now we need to enroll participants, which was its own set of challenges. So basically, we used 2 methods. We used a live enrollment, where researchers visited offices with equipment, set up little stations, and actually ran people through the whole experimental procedure and setup of the devices getting social media authorized, etc. We also did a remote enrollment where we mailed the devices out to the participants, and we set up a session with a remote web conferencing service called Zoom where one person could remote proctor them. So more details are in the paper, but here's the sort of pro-con list for each. We found that remote enrollment was better for enrolling more participants at a time. One proctor could keep an eye on about 10 people. In addition, participants found it very convenient. A lot of our initial people who didn't want to participate in the study mostly couldn't do it during their working day, but so with the remote enrollment, they could go home, and after dinner, they could set up a session and get enrolled. So participants definitely appreciated that feature. But it did come with drawbacks compared to live enrollment, with the fact that immediate troubleshooting was not possible. So if one of the devices was broken, if a participant had an issue with their phone that might need a little bit more in-depth troubleshooting, it was not always easy to solve that problem for them over the internet. In addition, the environment also had several problems. People had all kinds of connectivity issues. Wi-Fi dropped out, lights went out, dogs barking, children screaming, etc. It makes it very distractible. We also missed out on free recruitment, which is just sort of people dropping by, watching other people participate in the study and saying, I want to do that. And finally, as I mentioned before, we had some losses of equipment where we mailed out our devices to participants who wanted to participate. And then after sending them the devices, we never heard from them again. So there is that obvious risk when doing a remote enrollment. So just in general, to kind of give us an overview of how we did, out of 757 participants, we were able to retain 656 throughout the entire duration of the study. Of the 101 that dropped, 72 dropped for lack of participation. So after a month of no data coming in and several emails and text messages, we decided to drop them from further participation. So only 34 people opted out after enrollment, to which we attribute our very detailed informed consent. So looking at who stayed in the study the most and gave us the most data, we found that in-person direct payment was the best, with 90% of participants retaining 80% compliance or better. When we consider the same type of payment, but with a remote enrollment, we see it drop to 77%. And when we look at remote enrollment with lottery payment, it drops down to about 60%. So both of these methods are viable, but we definitely think that direct payment is best. So how did we do so well? We had a very organized internal team using tools such as Slack and Google Groups to keep in constant communication and ensure effective troubleshooting. We had regular reminders and communication with the participants, specifically reminding them when we pay them to say, hey, great job, here's $80, or, you know, people tend to like getting those emails. And then additionally, we did troubleshooting. And finally, we had a participant portal where participants could see data collection and self-monitor to ensure their data was coming in. In addition, it gave us another venue for troubleshooting. So in summary, recruitment for companies, the difficulty was HR and legal. They're the group that need to be most convinced. For enrollment, we found that remote enrollment was better for volume, but live enrollment was better for quality, and that both payments methods work, but direct payment seems to be better. And again, we end-loaded our study, which also seemed to be successful with a large majority of the payment of the study coming at the very end. As far as participants, most were concerned about privacy, which we largely dealt with via a very informed and explicit consent form and description of data usage. And finally, we found that our portal was very helpful so that participants could get immediate feedback on their devices and monitor themselves for any issues in data compliance. Thank you very much.
Can you share any of the results?
Yeah, it's so we just finished the study a couple weeks ago. We did have a couple of papers going out, so some things I can tell you. One of the things I was looking at was sleep and sleep debt, and we found that by looking at both sensors, the phone agent and the Garmin, we found the Garmin was off by about a half hour, 65% of the time. So things like using these sensors in conjunction can increase data sensitivity and give us more accurate information than any one of these devices alone. And another thing we were able to do was predict personality, and then we were able to see with these sensors and then we were able to see that it was better than, predicting personality with sensors was better than just questionnaires, and that these had benefits on job performance. Thank you.
Other questions? Maybe can I add on
Sure.
that question? You have so many different kinds of data, right? Including social media content, right?
Yes.
So do you have any plan how you link all these different kind of data and make sense of them?
Yes, it's definitely a very difficult process. And actually, Munmun, not to throw you under the bus, but she's our social media expert. But again, one of the things that we're trying to do is integrate all of these features together. And so part of that is leveraging machine learning to identify useful features, and part of that is really kind of assembling in a theoretical construct how these different streams work together. And so that's why we have such a very large team full of experts across a lot of different areas. So, yeah.
I really look forward. Yes, I have one question over. We need this for the live streaming, right?
Thank you for the interesting talk. I'm wondering about the role of standards, in particular in terms of, you mentioned the questionnaire that respondents had to fill out in order to participate. I think GDPR in Europe has, this is a subjective impression, but I think a lot of consumers and individuals understand that if something is GDPR compliant, that it reduces a lot of the complexity in what they have to understand that they are signing up to. Yeah. Do you think that those kinds of standards may make that work or that part of the work easier in future?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so the initial pain, I mean, the hour-long enrollment, well, 2 hour long if we did the actual helping them with the devices, et cetera. That was very painful for the participants, very long, drawn out. But then after that, once they're set up, everything was very passive and very simple. And so, they would just kind of log in with their portal periodically and kind of say, where am I at? They had a little color graphic. It was kind of green if you're good, yellow if you're having trouble, red if you have no data. And if they sent us any emails saying, hey, I traveled to Hawaii for the week, or I broke my device, I mean, whatever their particular issue was, then we could adjust their compliance and then send them a new device or adjust their time zone for Hawaii. I mean, whatever the solution was. So I definitely think that front-loading that privacy thing, and it also really helps on the feeling of the participant, the affect. They seem to be much happier. A lot of people had kind of said word of mouth, I participated in studies before. This is the first one that really explained to me what my data was doing. I felt much more comfortable, giving you my Facebook if you're only getting, you're not getting pictures or videos, that kind of thing. So it really helps to take what they imagine data and privacy to be and really specify what specifically we're getting, which is generally much more mundane than what people can imagine, especially in the middle of the Cambridge Analytica scandal and all that. So,
thank you.
Any other questions? One more, maybe? No? Okay, if not, let's thank Stephen and invite our third group of presenters.